Have you ever experienced a moment in your life where you felt like your whole world had shattered, like literally like somebody had pulled your life out from beneath your feet? At 63 years old, I can honestly say I've had more than one of those moments, and most of us do. If we live long enough, we are going to experience these challenges in life. We're going to experience heartbreak. Today, I have with me author Alex Sabag. And she went through this very type of experience. The moment occurred on her 33rd birthday, the day her boyfriend was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. Cannot even imagine what that was like. Alex is an author, a speaker, and business owner. Her most recent venture is the Soul Dive Yoga Studio, which was founded in 2022 in Palm Desert, California. Seeking solace in the practice of yoga, she not only found healing, but she found her mission or purpose to share the transformative power of yoga with the world, among other things, with her wisdom. In her memoir, Soul Dive, My Journey into the Deep, Alex shares her heartening story, and it was born from tragedy, but it ended in triumph. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Carol. It's great to be here.
I want to dive into your story a little bit. And when I was, I always look into my guests. I listen to podcasts. I read as much as I can about them. And I was putting myself in your shoes. I'm, 63 now. I remember being 33. I'd been married 8 years to the love of my life, still married to him. And we were planning our family. I can't even imagine going through this. And something I thought of too is Amy Porterfield, big business gal with the online courses. She always says to her students, share your scars and not your scabs when it comes to grief, when it comes to trauma, when it comes to whatever we've been through. And that really struck me. So I'm sure you didn't go from a place of this devastation to sharing your story. Can you walk us a bit through what brought you to this book?
Yeah, that's such a great quote. I will say one of the most powerful lessons I learned when I was being certified as a yoga teacher was if it's not fully processed, don't share it. People are not showing up to the yoga room to hear your life story while they're in Warrior 2. So just move on and call the poses and then maybe get to that at a later time. I think that's really powerful wisdom. Yeah, so I was 33 and had this, what I would classify now as a fairly traumatic experience that I experienced and witnessed. It's like his experience was quite different from mine, but I'll always remember the moment of being in the waiting room, the hospital, where you're just sort of like, you know, sitting on pins and needles with the arrival of like impending doom or what is this? And um, what I didn't realize at the moment, because I hadn't, I had a yoga practice, but it was like very much in the physical. I didn't have really a yoga purpose, if you will. Um, my my world went completely into fight or flight. So we heard the news and I was like, oh, sounds really challenging, but I got it. It's fine. Like I can fix it. I'll save you. I'll find the doctor to save you. And I completely spiraled into this like, Alex no longer exists as a human. Alex is only here to like defeat all unimaginable odds. And I literally woke up thinking that I could do it for the foreseeable future. I took care of him for 6 months after the diagnosis. But there was a really pivotal moment. The diagnosis came in June. My birthday is June 16th. I love a birthday, by the way, if anybody wants to like shoot me a little note on Instagram next summer. I remember the July, like the end of July, I was, he lived with me. So we were in my apartment in Chicago, and my dog happened to be on bed rest at the time too. So my dog and my boyfriend had a neurology team, if you can imagine that. And I take this little creature down to the little tiny patch of grass. I had stopped at the neighbor's house, made a margarita, and I'm just like sitting on this fence. It's probably like, I don't know, 8 or 9 inches tall. It's a tiny wrought iron fence. My dog was 8 pounds. And I'm just like waiting for him to do his business and sitting there alone thinking there is nothing that is going to be worse than this moment right now. Like I thought I had all these dreams of getting married and starting a family and living my, Lincoln Park brownstone dream in Chicago. And it just was like overnight shattered. And I think things were kind of starting to hit me that my life was completely falling apart. And I wasn't, able or willing to admit it, in the moment, maybe 6 or 8 weeks prior to this, kind of time and space. But I just never forget sitting there with the awareness that I was at the bottom. And the really beautiful thing about being aware that your life is completely falling apart is knowing that it really can't get any worse. It's like watching your whole life fall apart is much different than like losing a parent or, going through any other type of hardship. It's like, no, we only get one kind of trip around this whole thing in this human experience, right? And we have to make the most of it while we're here. And I didn't know how long I was going to be in that space, and I didn't know what I was going to do about it. But I did know that the one thing that kept getting me out of bed in the morning was yoga. And the studio was around the corner, and I would keep going, day after day, not because I had any power or could do any of the chaturanga, or I was very into like hot power yoga at the time. I really just would arrive and just lay there. But it was the only place that I was given permission that I could show up and simply be in any way, shape, or form that I arrived. And that permission was given to me by one of the teachers at the studio. And this sort of opened my eyes into this, understanding that nothing is with us forever. Nobody, no pet, no job, no relationship. It's like everything has its time and space within your experience. And at some point, you're going to go at it without the thing that you really love and are attached to. And one of the biggest kind of pieces of awareness, not only that my life was falling apart, but I had lost who I was, and I had no idea what I was even put on this earth to do. And I was kind of brainstorming what I was going to do to kind of figure myself out. And, in the list was go back to French school or, second city classes, and yoga teacher training was made it to the top because it seemed like the healthiest choice at the time. And that really was, kind of, I go back in that story because yoga was very much the catalyst to my healing, because it gave me a place as I was discovering my purpose. And throughout the journey of learning, about the philosophy and the history and the why behind the yoga, it gave me a voice to share. And in discovering my voice, fast forward, I end up with a yoga studio in Southern California, which sort of became my test kitchen for storytelling. And, I'm 6.5 years post caregiving period of my life. And I published the book in May. And so I think over all of that time in being diligent and devoted to the practice and showing up, day in and day out to some sort of yoga, right? It might not be a power yoga class. It might be a walk around the block, which by the way, is very much a yoga practice. Sort of not only gave me this healing, kind of the healing blanket that sort of wrapped around my existence, but propelled me into a space of, confidence and empowerment that what I went through wasn't meant to be shoved under the rug. It was really meant to be shared. And the book is, as much as it's, chronicle of my life here on earth thus far, it's really meant to show people that you're not alone. And that's first and foremost. There's so much isolation when we go through these experiences, and we don't think people understand, and no one will get it. And we do this and retreat and, kind of go out of the ring of life, which I very much did. You have to laugh, and, it's not always going to be funny in the moment, but there has to be some sort of lightness around it. Otherwise, what are we doing here? And you have to keep going. And that doesn't mean we get around it or we ignore it. It means we just have to keep going through, put one step in front of the other, whether you want to or not. Get out of bed, do something that fills you up, and keep living your life, because you only get to do it once. It's a very long-winded story of sort of how I came to the book. But
thank you for sharing that. It's interesting because you didn't take the victim route, which would have been very easy to do. I recently had, as my listeners know, I've talked a lot about this. I had a spinal fusion. I had spinal surgery at the beginning of the summer. And it very odd. I don't know if you've had surgery, woken up from anesthesia, but I just had this clarity around victimhood, how important it is, because even with what I do, I'm working in the health and fitness space. And I do see a lot of that mentality where people feel like things are happening to them. So, for instance, the whole perimenopause, menopause storm and transition. Yes, it can be challenging, but it's not a disease. There's not something wrong with you. But I see it being an excuse and falling into that, oh, this is happening to me. I don't have control. And that would have been so easy for you to do with something so traumatic to feel out of control. And instead, you took what you had, what you could do in the moment, and took those few steps.
Yeah, so the victim mindset has never really landed with me. So I just don't I can't do it. I can't sit at that table. I can't go down that path with conversations. I've had people very close to me in my life, and I'm not going to out them publicly, who are very much rooted in this victim mindset, and it drives me nuts.
Same.
Um, I'm not necessarily proud of how I handled the initial news and this, like, spawning into control and this obsession with, like, you know, beating it. There was no acceptance at that point. And I can look back and say that, like, the quicker we get to acceptance, the quicker we can get through. And I fought it because I'm stubborn a bit. I'm working on that. I'm also very impatient. And I will say, I found a bottle of wine. It's a French rosé and it's called Patience. And I drink her regularly so I can work on that as well.
Oh, it's
And,
funny.
but it just wasn't, sitting in that woe is me mindset was never going to be where I landed because I'm just simply wired differently. But over time, as I did start to, like, accept and become aware of, like, how bad things were and how devastating my own life really was, I think that's sort of around, like, that was the choice I had to make. Like, what was I going to do to go back to me? Or was I just going to drink myself into oblivion, start partying and, like, hope it all goes away in a different form? And I'll be honest, like, some of the dark moments did look like that, this, like, excessive numbing out and hoping that, like, I would wake up tomorrow and everything would be different. Um, but I think that we all have a choice. And I think as a greater population, if I may generalize, we forget that we actually do have a choice every single day with how we're going to live. I just made an Instagram post, like a lot of people did. We're in Q4, meaning it's the final stretch. It's, we're not quite done with 2024 yet. You got one more quarter to go. And how are you going to make it? How are you going to make it end? How it ends is up to you. How I moved forward through that whole experience was up to me. No one was going to force me. Um, I did have love and support, but no one was going to be like, all right, Alex, this is what you have to do. This are the steps you have to take. And by the way, those steps look very different person to person. That's why people like you exist. So you can, like, hold their hand and walk them through, whatever challenges come with age and and health and, sort of the health, the wellness part of the whole human experience. So yeah, I think, as a reminder to everybody, we do absolutely have a choice. And I will say one thing about you waking up from general anesthesia. So much clarity comes from a really good night's sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Sure.
just sometimes you just got to knock out for a little bit. And then we wake up and we're like, dang, look, things don't hurt. I'm feeling a little fresh, maybe a little groggy at first, but you come out of it. So good for you for recognizing rest, even if it was induced.
Yes. Yes, yes. And with back surgery, trust me, it's a whole different thing that they throw everything at every medication you could conceivably imagine for pain and relaxation. You get it with a
Yep.
spinal surgery. So, yeah, that was an
Yep.
interesting experience to wake up. And it was funny. I have these moments, and I'm sure you've had them too, where you just feel like you got to make a shift. And I am constantly doing this. I never stay in one spot. I think it drives my husband nuts because
Mhm.
I periodically will feel this, okay, I need to reassess. I need to throw some things off the bus, maybe pursue something different. And this process is just ongoing.
It is. I will say I can tell it's coming when I start to get irritable, and
Mm,
I can't quite, like, pinpoint what it is. I'm actually, like, it came up again for me recently. So this is, like, very fresh, where it just was like, I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like it. Like, nothing's right. I can't sit still. I'm fussing with everything. I can't, like, drop in because I'm in a transition period. I'm not in, you know, the, like, the ease that sort of comes post transition period. And I feel that. And I think I think a lot of people feel it, but then we get stuck in obligation and complacency and living for other people. And as women, I know I'm not alone. And I did it. I showed up as a caregiver and I chose it. I mean, I really did exercise the biggest power of choice by saying, I'm going to take care of you, you know, come hell or high water. It was like, that is like what you do when you have this really, really big love for somebody. I also made the choice to leave. And that's one of those things that is a little cringy to share and talk about. And I've gotten a little, you know, maybe a little heat for it. It's like, well, how could you do that? How could you abandon the relationship and leave? And at the end of the day, my answer is me. I chose me. You know, there was a big life ahead of me. And it's like to go down with him in a way, or to set myself free. It didn't mean that I had to cut ties entirely. And I didn't. We were in communication and, you know, until the end, but I did choose myself, and I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid at this point to admit it. And I'm not afraid to tell other people that there's going to be casualties when you choose you. But if you're not choosing you, who else is going to? You know, and putting your health first and taking care and putting your own mask on first, you know, like being on the airplane. It's really about making sure you are operating from a place of full before serving the people that are close to you in your life. And that was something I had to learn and have to be continually reminded of, because it's really easy to fall back into that pattern of, oh, I have to do this, or I should do that. Or, you know, when we get pulled in these directions, but they're not fulfilling, all of them. If they are, go do it. Great. More power to you. Go to all the cocktail parties, say yes to all the dates, you know, but sometimes we have to say no and actually listen to what's going on. You know, when we feel those periods of agitation or shifting coming. I don't know about you. You're in Albuquerque, so I would imagine that you do hear things, but I hear some voices. I hear some whispers from, you know, angels, and I get spoken to. And sometimes it's like really inconspicuous, and sometimes it's just a word, you know, or like stay. I used to hear stay all the time. Um, but yeah, I don't even know what the question was, but here we are talking about shifting.
No, there's a
If you're
lot
in
to
voice,
unpack there. There's a lot to unpack here. I appreciate so much your honesty. It's easy for somebody to sit back and judge and say, well, why did she leave the relationship when you haven't personally been in that situation? That's something I've really learned as I've gotten older, that you just can't judge other people's choices in the moment. They do the best they can in the moment, you know, what's right for them. And I related to it because my sister sadly was just recently diagnosed with Alzheimer's. I can look back and realize it was probably coming on years ago. There were signs. And all of us had, she's in South Carolina. All of us had decisions to make as siblings on how we would deal with this, contact her, because obviously the conversations were going to be difficult. You know, she's losing her memory, and she's changing. She's not the same as how she was. I made the decision to call and chat with her and just connect with her. But my brother was like, no, I can't do that. And I said, well, why? And he said, I would be doing it out of obligation and doing it for me, and it wouldn't do her any good. And I thought, oh, wow, you know, I wasn't upset, but it was really true in a sense, because there was a little bit of that when I contacted her. You know, we had not been close in the past. So there was a little bit of, oh, I need to do the right thing here. And he
yeah.
was recognizing, well, you know, I'm not doing it for her, I'm doing it for me. So as you were speaking, that was kind of coming up in my mind. And it is easy to sit back and say, well, I would do this and I would do that and I would never do X, Y, or Z. But the reality is we don't know until we're in those situations. And we have to do what we think is best in the moment.
It's true. It's, you know, nobody really prepares us for real life. Nothing. I mean, like as much as there are amazing, loving parents, of which I have two of them, and I'm very blessed to have them, there is nothing they could have said, no wisdom they could have imparted that would have prepared me for that moment. And as much as I was into yoga and understood non-reacting and all, you know, getting little glimpses of those principles, nothing was going to make me an expert at sitting there, like being in the room when it happened. And I think we have to like, this is where grace comes in as part of just like interpersonal relationships, and whether they're familial or friends or colleagues or whatever it is, like giving the person grace, because you're right, we're dealing with whatever tools we have in the moment. And oftentimes when trauma hits, our tools are sitting up there on the shelf collecting dust. Like I got tools right now, slept really well last night. I did a walk. I've had breakfast. I've had my decaf coffee here. Like I'm great. Throw it at me. I'm ready. But like when we're not expecting it, and maybe, didn't sleep that well, or have had a lot of stress in other areas of our life, like there's so many contributing factors to what make us react and respond in the way we do. And yes, of course, it's great to take 10 deep breaths, before making any rash decisions. But as people, we fall short, we fail. And I'm the poster child of failure in these, experiences. And I think sharing it and being really candid about who are you doing it for, and why, and is it going to add value, or is it getting you closer to like your alignment with your purpose? And like, these are all really deep philosophical questions that are never getting posed in the waiting room, like
Right.
it's not it. It wasn't until, the yoga teacher training was no pun intended, quite an enlightening experience for me, because there were schools of thought that I had never been exposed to. And I could go down like a whole soapbox of that and the alignment with like different faiths and practices and whatnot. But I think what was very interesting to me is in whatever way, maybe I was just ready to hear it. And I showed up in this really, really open space. Like, okay, like this was not a great life experience for me. I want to do better next time, but it really at the end of it, I was like, man, people need to graduate from college and then just like do a 200 hour. Like it's got to be baked in. It's life skills in so many ways, shapes, and forms. And it really does teach us to just have a little grace, take a minute, and just like sit with whatever is real in the moment. And by the way, we're never guaranteed to like it ever.
Right.
And that's a
Right.
really tough to like to accept. We want to like it. We're people. It's what it is.
I went through a 200-hour training for yoga. I no longer teach it, but I have no regrets going through that because I did learn a lot about myself in the process. And the training that I went through, we were deliberately put in uncomfortable situations, both physically and mentally, for a reason. Not to torture us, obviously. But I remember not being real happy at certain times. And something else, as you were speaking, I was thinking, stage of life makes a big difference in how we deal with things and the decisions we make. Because I look back 33, oh my goodness. My decision-making process, where I was is so completely and entirely different from where I am now. And working with women over 40, 45, 50, I see that stage of life is huge in our responses.
Yep. It really is. I think each situation kind of prepares us for what's next. And, sometimes we have these earth school lessons that are so earth shattering. We're like, whoa, I mean, wasn't there a more subtle way I could have learned that? And I think, the very first chapter of my book it's called the 2x4 moment. And so I do firmly believe that as we're going along in our own existence, we're constantly exposed to a lesson and a learning. And a lot of it is subtle, a little tap over here, a little whisper, a little nudge, and we can respond. I mean, I think I'll give the general, human population the benefit of the doubt that in a lot of cases we gravitate in those directions. Sometimes we don't. And sometimes we're really stubborn like me and ignore it because it's inconvenient and I don't want to be bothered and I want to do this agenda. Like this is my outcome and I'm going to push so hard to get there that any other, soft redirect or little invitation, I'm not interested in it and I'm not listening. And guess what happens? The 2x4 comes and slaps you so hard upside your head, you can't see straight. And once you have that moment, which I very much did in the waiting room through this diagnosis, I think you start to look at, the subtle a little bit differently. I don't want to get hit by the 2x4 anymore. I know I will. It's just inevitable. It's coming. It's everybody's life is going to get, like you said in the opening, the rug is going to get ripped out from under our feet, period, the end. But we can have some practices and tools here to soften the blow. We can say, oh, I was taught this breathing exercise, or whatever it is. We can actually use the tools that we are collecting with each of these lessons we're learning as we go along, and there is a choice in that, right? To choose to continue to move through it versus to fall into the victim and say, oh, everything's happening to me, I give up, whatever. That's very much the easy way out, and I don't think we're asked to take the easy way out. I think we're asked to take the work, and it's every single day showing up and working as humans on being human, because there really is no guidebook, rule book out there entirely, to support us as we go.
Yes. You were talking about complacency earlier, and I think this really plays into it. And I'm big on words, so sometimes it sounds really weird, but I'll do a word study to dive into a word. And I had heard an interview you did, and you were talking about complacency. And I'm going to look through my notes here for just a moment. And I looked at one definition, and it says it's feeling so satisfied with our own abilities, our current situation, that we feel like we don't need to try any harder. And I think that's a dangerous place to be. There is no growth when we're complacent.
It is a one-way ticket to death. That is how I feel about it. And death, I use death in many contexts, right? Yes, there is the physical dying of a human, and that is a form of death. There is an ending of a relationship, an ending of a job, a moving across the country. It is an ending. Deaths are endings, and we avoid them as people because we're wired for life. We're not wired for death. We do everything to keep ourselves alive, and we put relationships on life support, and we, go into these crazy caregiving moments like I did and be like, I can save it because I'm not ready to let it go. And complacency to me, like once we get on that hamster wheel of obligatory living, and like we fall into complacency because we don't choose to grow. We don't choose to evolve. We don't choose to keep listening to the nudges or, the shape shifting that happens over time, because the only thing we're guaranteed here is change. And we're very resistant to it because that means we have to let something go. We have to walk away from who we were in order to step into who we're becoming. And that is a very, very scary process for a lot of people, but we have to trust. And I'm a big person of faith here. We have to trust to let go of the good, because we know that the great is on the other side of it. All of it.
Yes,
And that's tough.
it is tough. I'm a person of faith as well, and my relationship with God is very, very important to me. It's top. It's faith. It's family. Um, Work obligations are way over here, but faith and family are at the top. And I realize people don't, not everyone is going to share my perspective here, but I've noticed that I don't grow in that spiritual relationship if I'm complacent. I have to step out of the comfort zone and step away from that complacency in order to experience something fuller, something bigger, something greater.
Yeah, it's true. And it's the faith in all the things we can't see. And
Right.
I will say that, yes, yoga got me out of bed in the morning, but it was faith underneath it all that was telling me that it was going to be okay, even when everything wasn't. And things were not okay for a long time. There's a lot of aftermath. The event hits, and then there's aftershocks, is like kind of the way I put it, where it's like one thing has to burn, and then the other, it's like these residual dumpster fires that just keep going and going and going. And my advice to you is, when you see something in your life go up in flames, please don't run back in. Let it go. Let it burn. You have to let it burn in order to make room for the bounty that is coming. And you have to have faith that it will get there. And the quicker we can let go and surrender, the faster we get through. I didn't have to spend, 5 years of my life in this like purgatory period of resisting and grasping and being unwilling to let these different, parts of my life burn to the ground. but they were burning anyway. I mean, that's the thing. Hindsight is so 2020, right? They were all going. My relationship with Chicago, the PR company that I built, my friendships, my communities, I mean, all of it had to go. And it was the most painful process because I loved my life, but I was complacent. I loved it. It was great. Nothing was wrong with it. I was like, you know, I was a publicist. I was planning parties. I was fundraising for great nonprofits. And like, I was doing really solid work. I mean, I raised a lot of money for a lot of really good causes. There's nothing wrong with that, but there was no depth to it. There was no depth in, my day to day. It was like, oh, a date over here and a little cocktail party over there. And like, it was just all it was more surface level than what I was put on this earth to be. And I was really smacked into, all right, you got to go deeper and you're not doing it on your own. So I'm going to put you there and you're going to figure it out, or I'm going to keep slapping you down until you finally wake up. And eventually we come to, because we don't want to get hit over the head anymore. Eventually we learn. And it was no different for me. And I remember my 33rd birthday like it was yesterday. And I remember my 38th birthday. And my birthday is heavy. I mean, I loved my birthday. I just made such a big deal about it. I'm kind of an only child, and I love it. I think we need to have a reason to celebrate, getting out of bed any day, especially on our birthday. And this did put kind of a damper and a bit of a cloud on it for me. But I remember when I woke up on my 38th birthday, I was sitting right out here. There's a little seating area under those palm trees over there. And I had my journal and my coffee, and I sat there for like 2 hours. And I was like, man, I don't want to cry. I finally, something had lifted where whatever had happened. And it doesn't make it okay. I mean, nothing about that situation is fair or right, or it's definitely not. But it didn't have a hold on me the way that it used to. And I think that I could have arrived there a lot sooner if I was just willing to let go and willing to surrender and have a bit more obedience in the faith relationship with God instead of fighting it all. And eventually I got there, and, life still comes with its fair amount of curveballs, and, I didn't expect that, or here we are. And, I shared with you, my home, like, where do I live? I want to live somewhere, but the weight of the situation and that experience had lifted. And the only word that came forward in that moment was gratitude. There was finally a moment of, I'm grateful for the experience because of who I am at that place and time on the morning of my 38th birthday. And I got to tell you, I'm grateful that I got there, but it was a really tough journey. And I know a lot of other people can relate to that. It's, I don't expect all the hands in the crowd to go up like, oh, I too was a caregiver at 33. It's not about that. My journey really is no different from anybody else's, because we've all experienced moments of, the 2x4 moment and the grief and the loss. And I woke up one way and I went to bed another way. That is everybody. There is so much relatability here. And I didn't realize it in the moment because I was too busy looking for the apples to apples comparison. But in going through all of this, I can see that we aren't really that different in having these life experiences. The facade of them might just look a little bit different person to person.
Yes, we all have our moments where that life is pulled out from underneath us. It might be a death, a diagnosis. It might be a divorce, the end of a relationship, an unexpected move, a job loss. There's so many different ways it can manifest. And then of course we're individuals. So what really is shocking or causes grief in me might not do the same in you. You might have a different response. So we have that individuality. And then you talked earlier about the tools. I think, yes, we do. Each time we go through something like this, we come away with knowledge. We come away with tools in our toolbox. But there's always going to be those triggers, those unexpected things, something that triggers a memory, something that comes out of nowhere. I know that's been a big one for me over the years. And I have a therapist. I've had a therapist for a long time. She's been instrumental in getting me through some things. And she's really helped me to have a way of responding when something unexpected, because what I found was it was the unexpected, that 2x4, that would knock my progress back. I'd be making all this progress and all of a sudden, oh wow, I wasn't anticipating that to happen. And so learning, okay, how can I handle this?
Yeah, I had an experience a couple weeks ago, and it's something that repeated from the year prior. And I was not expecting to be, you talk about triggers. I was not expecting to be triggered over the anniversary of his death. And so my fiance he died just over 2 years ago. The day actually that I was given the keys to Soul Dive Yoga was the day he passed. And we weren't together as in like in a relationship. And I knew it's like for so long, I like waited for that phone call. And so there was that anticipation. And when I finally, learned, of course, there was like my initial grief and that whole, kind of process. But when the first anniversary hit, which was a year ago, I was not expecting this like weight. And it was like, it came out of nowhere. It was like actually a week prior to the actual date. I felt heavy. I felt like ill, but I wasn't sick in a way. And I couldn't figure it out. I had newly started dating somebody and I was a disaster. I couldn't stop crying. I couldn't soothe. I didn't know it was wrong. So I didn't even know what tool to go get. And it wasn't until, some dots got connected and I was like, oh, this is grief. And then I knew what to do. I mean, I knew to like take walks, go to yoga, shut my computer. There was nothing I could do to avoid it. And guess what? A week ago, I'm in Chicago and the exact same thing happened again. This
Wow.
period was a little bit shorter. It was about 24 hours, but it was like unconsolable. Nothing can be done. And it was, it's challenging when there's people, staying with a friend and, kind of communicating what's going on, but like also there's nothing you can do about it and it has nothing to do with you. And that's, I think, what we kind of lose sight of sometimes is if somebody is having like a visceral reaction to something that's going on in their life or a trigger moment that's coming up for them. I think we could all like take a couple cues out of, again, the yoga training book and learn how to hold space where it's not about pity. It's not about, oh, there, little girl, it'll be fine. Or like, here's your glass of wine, you'll get over it, or any of that. It's literally just being in the moment with people as they're going through whatever the experience is. And the experience could be fresh or something that kind of comes up out of nowhere. And that is one thing I'm really grateful that I learned. I learned how to do it. And I think the people in my life that also know how to do it back can just listen and just be there, like be in the room or not. But we're going to get triggered by the things that have happened. I mean, so many people have had, whether it's traumatic childhoods or traumatic divorces or bad breakups, whatever, the 16-year-old breakup and the 40-year-old divorce is no different. They're the same emotions underneath that experience. And when we move through those with the people that are in our inner circle, we don't have to do this for everybody, right? I mean, there's a couple people that you're going to like be holding space for as they're going through their own human experiences. Just know that it's not about what you say. It's about how you show up. It's putting the act in action for them. It's just being there. It's dropping off a meal. It's dropping off a coffee. It's taking their dog for the walk or dropping their kid off, picking them up. It's a small thing to just hold the space while they're going through it. They're not going to be in it forever. Couple days. And usually we can like, move through and get out if we're choosing, right? I mean,
Right.
certainly stay if we
Right.
want, but I like life is not rainbows and butterflies. It's never always going to be that way. We can wake up and think, well, the day is going to be great. And then it's just not. And it is what it is. And that's okay.
Yes. And that's something we have to learn. I remember being a little girl and thinking that there would be a happily ever after, like there would be a blanket of happiness that would suddenly shroud me. And then having that realization of, oh, maybe you have a blanket for a day and then the next day the blanket of happiness is gone. It's never this constant was a difficult lesson. And this concept of holding space, not just for other people, but for ourselves. I heard you on a podcast talking about clutter. And it's interesting because I think it was when I first started my podcast almost 4 years ago, it was one of my tips for getting healthy, I think, getting in shape was making space and getting rid of the clutter, getting rid of the mental clutter, the physical clutter, where you have room.
I'm so glad you brought this up. Like the space we occupy in our homes and in our like most intimate areas is a direct reflection of our health and well-being. I mean, I believe this to the core, whether it's cleaning out your closet or cleaning out your refrigerator and your pantry. I mean, all these spaces should be completely dialed, and I'm very OCD. I can tell you that with full honesty. But this concept of like creating space, I mean, I have to say, I'm doing a book signing with Room and Board, the furniture store, and the whole theme is creating space, mind, body, and soul. There are so many things in my life that have come through because I've had the space for them to show up. And there's so many things that weren't, that there was very like stuck, stagnant energy because I didn't. And this whole like me ending up in California was a direct result of a girlfriend of mine who's a stylist getting rid of 12 like industrial sized trash bags of clothes and shoes and
Wow.
things, like just getting it out so that I knew what to put on. I could feel good about what I was wearing. It's like, I just have newsflash for everybody. You do not need your college t-shirts. And ladies, if you are dating a man who's hanging on to 20 college t-shirts, get out. If he's unwilling to get rid of those t-shirts, there is no room for you in that relationship. And I stand by that fully. We don't need all the stuff. We really don't. Like open shelves are amazing. Guess what open shelves symbolize? The relationship, the job, the next move. Like if we don't have space physically, emotionally, energetically, it's not coming. If you're working 80, 90 hours a week in a job, you're never going to be able to start your own business. You're not superhero. You're not. I mean, we're still human at the end of the day. And so, yeah, clean that shit up like right now. Like listen to this podcast, go into your closet and get at least 10 things out of there before this wraps up.
This is so funny because as we're recording this, before I hopped on here, I had started because my back had been so sore I couldn't bend forward and I wasn't supposed to bend forward. So I couldn't get at like bottom drawers and things were kind of just shoved in. And I've got all these stacks on my bed of what's going to, maybe my daughters will like this, what's going to go to a charity, what's going to stay. And it's important to me because I have seen the connection between mental health and clutter. I know of two people, I will not mention names, family members that live in a state of clutter. And when I mean clutter, I'm like, oh my gosh, how do you walk through the apartment? And
Oh no.
then you see it spill over. They're disorganized in other areas of their life.
Or they're full,
Right.
like it, but not in a good way, not in the full, like, oh, I have a full cup. It's like, I've observed this like lack of space because all the little corners are stuffed with things that, are old or not serving you. And I love the sentiment that your daughters might want some things from your home,
Right.
but this is your permission slip also to just get rid of it. And we can always go get more. Unless it's like super sentimental, like a picture frame of the grandparents or like, I have a couple of my grandma's scarves and like, it's like, but the rest of it, I tell my mom, I'm like, just get rid of it. I don't want it. No offense, but I don't want it. Just go. Like, just throw it out, make some room, make some space. Now, my mother, I will throw her under the bus here. She'll make space and fill it in the same day. God love her.
Oh,
The
yeah.
amount of Amazon boxes that show up to that house is really remarkable. So she's supporting the economy through and through. But to everybody else who's open and receptive to these sort of messages, just clean it out and keep the open space. And then I love a journal. Okay. I'm obviously a writer and I did, write a book in a very short amount of time. However, my journaling practice has been with me for a really long time. Usually it's just stream of consciousness. It's another way of unloading. It's emptying out the shelves up here on pages and then don't go back and read them. Toss them, burn them, keep the journal till it's over and then, file it away. It's not about reliving what was on your mind yesterday. You don't have to fix it. Just let it go, put it down and move on, but just get it off, right? Unload from the mind, unload from the weight. I mean, our thoughts and our stuff is physically heavy. It weighs us down in ways that like, I don't I don't know that we'll ever fully understand, but I do know it to be true. Just get rid of it. Let it go. If it keeps coming up over and over, remember the thoughts and patterns. If you're hearing a certain word or a song or a color or whatever, maybe investigate that a little bit. Could be a nice little message from a very, very subtle angel. I don't know. Or pray for something a little bit more obvious. It's like when I think I'm getting these like little whispers, I'm like, okay, I'm tired. I've been on an airplane for the last 6 weeks. Can we be a little bit more clear? What am I supposed to be taking away from this experience? Like, you're hiding it and I can't see it, like, help me out. But these are all really amazing practices just to keep us clear. We want to be this like open vessel, right? Even though all the things that we have do accumulate scars over time, good and bad. We all have the battle wounds from the life experiences, and that's okay. And we should, in the right, set and setting, wear them very proudly and share when it's appropriate. But for the most part, we don't need to take with us, all the other things. It's like the things that you're holding on to, ask yourself, is it even yours? And then
Right.
you're amazed by like, oh, wait, actually has nothing to do with me. Okay, I'll let that go too. But that
And
was,
mentally
yeah,
too, we can say yes to things that we don't really want to do, or they're not necessarily bad things. They could even be really good things. But I've learned that whatever I say yes to, I'm saying no to something else because that's taking up space and time. So I've had to mentally declutter too. And sometimes, and I think this is hard for a lot of women, especially my generation, we were not taught to say no. I'm in my 60s. We were not taught that way. We were taught to be agreeable and say yes, or at least I was. That's how I was raised. So learning to say no to things, even things that are good, even things that might even be fun, has been a learning process for me. It's taken me my whole life.
yep. No is a complete sentence.
Yes, it
It's
is.
always a reminder. Oftentimes, when you're saying yes, the thing you're saying no to is yourself. It's your peace of mind. It's your quiet space. It's your alone time. It's maybe a romantic evening with your husband. That's like, we don't think about the thing that we're giving up when we say yes to the thing that's like very mediocre. And why have mediocre? We talk about, um, in yoga, the word manifestation, very, very buzzy. Okay. Like, I will
Hmm.
make manifestation akin to your hopes and your dreams. Like, what's on your heart? What do you desire? And we all have those. We have the dreams, we have the wishes, we have like, we have the vision of where we want to be. And so, then there's this practice of like, well, how do we manifest it? And I will say that I can't take full credit for this. This is my 80-year-old father, who wasn't 80 at the time. But as I was kind of going through my introspective part of my life and in the yoga teacher training, I remember being at my home in Iowa, and it was a beautiful backyard. And I was sitting by the pool, and my dad walks up to me with a box from Amazon, and he said, "Here's more of your happy horse shit, Alex," and like dropped it on the ground. And I'm like, you don't get me. And I sat with that, and I'm like, there's a big generational gap. I mean, my parents were older when I came around, and unplanned. And so, we do the best we can. But I really thought about that, and I thought about it in relation to manifestation. And what I've come down to is, if you do not move toward your manifestations, it is all a bunch of.
A Pollyanna pie in the sky, I call it. Um, I think it's important that you made manifestation more of a verb as opposed to this kind of passive thing, because it's gotten this kind of woo-woo, connotation to it where, oh, I'll just think about this and it'll happen. And it takes the action part of it out of it and living as if it's already happened. That was advice I got when I started my business and took a business course and a mastermind. They would say, start acting like you're already successful. Start acting like this is happening, like your goals are happening. And I think it's the same with fitness. Start acting like how does the fit, healthiest version of you act? What do they want? What does that version of you want? How do they live? How do they get up in the morning? And I used to do a lot of group training, and that would be something I would ask them and have them pinpoint is how, because then it takes you to your why. Do I even want this? Is this even important? If you can't visualize the thing. Mhm. I ran marathons too, so I get it. Mhm. Oh, mm. And it feels good. Yeah, we do overcomplicate it. It's all of the little things. I've said that to women many, many times, and this is especially true when we hit perimenopause. It's not the big things. It's all of the little things that add up into the bigger whole. Like you said, the book Atomic Habits, such a wonderful book, and habit stacking, and taking those steps forward. And I personally feel lighter when I take action. I feel like a weight has been lifted off. If I sit paralyzed and think about something, it drives me crazy. But if I just take some small steps forward, I feel just so light. Mhm. You'll get there. You'll get there. Oh, I agree. I agree. I'm a fan of walking. Wait, I do weights and I walk, and that's pretty much my routine. And my walking it is not power walking with weights in my hands or whatever. It is meditative, and I'll go out for a full hour and I'll go grab a coffee and walk, and I absolutely love it. And I feel like my cortisol just kind of does that and goes all the way down, and I feel so good. But you're right about consumption because we don't get to, if we've seen something, we can't unsee it. If we've heard something, we can't unhear it. We can't take back what we've eaten. So those choices all do add up, and such good advice. So Alex, I want to be respectful of your time. This has been such a fun conversation. Just really uh, digging into some of these bits of sage wisdom that you shared with us. And as we wrap up, how can listeners get your book, find out more about you? I love the cover. Oh, this sounds wonderful. All of this will be in the show notes. Alex, thank you again so much. And to our listeners, wherever you are in the world, we wish you every blessing. Bye for now.